Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Tuesday morning by Andrew Erickson and by our guest, Joe Dolan. Joe, thank you so much for coming on. We were talking, it's that time of year. We are already starting to have the exhaustion creep in of a long fantasy season. We're not even really halfway through yet.
Oh yeah, it's and we got 8 teams. It's week 8, and we just had 6 teams on bye, and now we have no teams on bye, which is great for fantasy football, but not so hot for the waiver wire this week. So maybe if you're trying to improve your team, you need to be working the trade market, which is that's what you brought me on to talk about. So I'm glad to be with you guys.
We are very excited to have you. I want to get your guys, both your opinions very quickly. We don't often cover the primetime games on the next morning show because everybody already watched. They already kind of know what's going on. But there was such a standout game on Monday Night Football from Jordan Addison. First of all, just the Vikings winning in general, big surprise. But the real true breakout game, it felt like, for Jordan Addison. 7 catches on 10 targets, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Erickson, I'll start with you here. Just what was your kind of main takeaway from that Addison explosion?
I mean, he's just honestly, I think this is what he's been doing all year. Like, he's been delivering splash plays. He's been catching touchdowns. He's tied for second in the NFL in receiving touchdowns behind only Tyreek Hill with 6. So he's been running really hot in terms of efficiency, ripping off these big plays left and right. And in this game, he was really involved from a target share perspective. So again, whether Jefferson's there or not, like, I don't envision his production and his efficiency like going down in any way. And what we found is when Jefferson plays with him, he's sufficient because coverage is not necessarily dictated to try to stop him. And through these last 2 games and, pretty favorable matchups, like, he's been able to expose defenses, especially on that play before the second half ended where he just rips the ball away and just runs into the end zone. Like, that was just an amazing play. And he's a big time playmaker. So Addison, you're starting him every single week.
Yeah, Joe, we have talked a lot on the show about how rookie wide receivers, you see that second half of the season explosion. Yep. Those are the types of players that often become league winners. Do you think we could be seeing that with Jordan Addison? Not that he has been inefficient early in the season, but just another step up.
Well, the thing here is with Minnesota, and I know we make fun of the Vikings and primetime Cousins and all that stuff. Cousins was really good last night, by the way. The thing about them, though, is since Cousins has arrived in Minnesota, they've been what I like to call a narrow fantasy team. They typically give it to one back. I know that's not necessarily the case now. They have 2 wide receivers and a tight end that they throw the ball to, and you start those guys every week. And Jordan Addison has just seamlessly gone into the Adam Thielen role. And, I remember, obviously, in April, 4 straight wide receivers come off the board, and I oftentimes forget which order those 4 wide receivers came off, but stunned once again to see Jordan Addison, who was a Blitnikoff Award winner at Pitt. Then he goes to USC and is hugely productive. He falls to the 4th wide receiver drafted. And I'm not writing the book or closing the book on Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson. I know it hasn't been great for Johnston so far, or certainly Zay Flowers, who has been productive as well. But it seems like we have to start to adjust these, I guess it's not arbitrary, but the old trope of, if my wide receiver doesn't weigh X, then I'm not drafting him.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith is a dog, Jordan Addison is very clearly a dog. And sometimes I think in the modern NFL, if a guy can play, he can play. We've seen teams change the way they evaluate the quarterback position. And certainly they're going to start needing to change the way they evaluate the wide receiver position because we're seeing some of these really small guys start to produce big time. Even Tutu Atwell, who I think is the lightest skill position player in the NFL, is making plays for the Rams. So you've got to maybe adjust your models a little bit when a player who can clearly produce like a Jordan Addison is coming into the league.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to look back on that wide receiver class in the first round in the years to come. And we knew it at the time when guys at the same position go back to back to back to back, that it's going to be one that you look back on. And certainly Quentin Johnson bringing up the rear so far, but cases to be made for any of those 4 guys. This is a running back show, though. We are going to talk about some week 8 buy low, sell high running backs here. We're also going to talk about some of the most traded running backs. That's where we're going to start. The number 1 most traded running back in the last day and a half since week 7 ended, Rachaad White. So Erickson, I'll start with you here. Are you buying, selling, or holding on Rachaad White right now?
Remind me again who Rachaad White plays on Thursday night. The Buffalo Bills, who are averaging like 6 yards per carry to running backs. They made the Patriots offense, the most inept offense on planet Earth, and the Giants look like they could move the ball. Look like the 07 Patriots out there. So I want Rachaad White. I'm buying Rachaad White because everybody hates Rachaad White. Because like, oh, he's not efficient. It's like, guys, like his run blocking is horrible. The Buccaneers cannot run the football. But you know who they can run the football against? The worst run defense in the NFL. The Bills defense is so injured all over the place. They can't stop anybody. So if I need a running back with some upside this week, Rachaad White is still getting all the snaps and all the usage that we want in fantasy football. So I'm buying Rachaad White before this Thursday night game. And then if you want to trade him after that, that's the move to make, in my opinion. You want to sell high? That's the time to do so is after the Bills game, not before. So I'm going to buy Rachaad White.
Joe, White's weekly finishes in half PPR, RB 38, 9, 39, 20 bye week, 37, and RB 16 last week. Again, that's in half PPR. Yeah. Are you buying, selling, or holding on him right now?
I think he might be more of a hold. I don't know if I want to sell him right now. Now, the thing is, they've clearly struggled to run the football. They were mixing in. Remember Sean Tucker? He was the big hot name early in the season. They tried it with him. I don't think he's played a snap since week 3. The last couple of weeks, they've tried to get Keyshawn Vaughn involved, and he can't get going. So Rachaad White, even though his numbers aren't good, they're still better than the other options that they've tried, which to me indicates that he's the best back here. The concern I have is maybe the Bucs, they see this as an imminently winnable division. They go make a move at the trade deadline for another running back. That would be my concern with Tampa Bay. But Rachaad White is currently tied with Jahmyr Gibbs for RB21 in expected fantasy points. Obviously, he has not lived up to that in terms of actual fantasy points scored. He's down at RB31 in that department. He's more of a hold for me, though, because at the very least, he's getting the role. He has the check down role, and he's produced as a receiver. So he's just kind of a boring guy to have on your team. And then hopefully some better matchups come down the pike.
Let's throw out some potential trades here. These are actual trades that have gone down in FantasyPros My Playbook involving Rachaad White. So I want to get your guys' opinion on if you would also make these trades or if you wouldn't. First one here is we actually saw both of these, Rachaad White for Jackson Smith-Njigba. We also saw Rachaad White for Jordan Addison. So for either of those two guys, Joe Dolan, would you have traded Rachaad White?
Not for Smith-Njigba. I sure would have for Addison. Addison's looking like you guys mentioned, a potential league winner. I don't see a league winner in Rachaad White's range of outcomes, even if I think he could still be a useful fantasy running back.
Another one for you, Joe. Rachaad White plus Jordan Addison for Justin Jefferson.
I would make that deal. I typically like being on the side of the 1 in a 2-for-1 trade because the 1 is normally the locked-in starter, and the other two, as good as Addison looked last week, Addison's not going to outproduce a healthy Justin Jefferson if Justin Jefferson is healthy, but I would take the risk on that deal for sure.
Last one for you here, Joe. Rachaad White plus Tyler Lockett for Kenneth Walker. So based on your general approach, it sounds like you would also do that one.
I would do that one too because Walker's a locked-in RB1, so I would do that one. Yes.
Erickson, what do you think about any of those? There was Rachaad White for JSN, Rachaad White for Jordan Addison. There was White plus Addison for Justin Jefferson, White plus Lockett for Kenneth Walker. Any of those stand out to you, Erickson?
I think, going after the receivers, I think makes a lot of sense because I don't think as useful as Rachaad White can be as he's a floor play. Like he's someone that you can he's your RB2. Like that's what he's been all year. That's what he's going to be all year probably, just an RB2, but not someone that's going to I won my week because of Rachaad White. Like that's probably never going to happen. Whereas these rookie receivers, we saw it during Amon-Ra St. Brown's rookie year. It's like they get a pocket stretch of games where they get a lot of targets and they're putting up 20, 25 points every single week and they're winning you weeks. I just don't think that's going to happen with Rachaad White, regardless of who he's playing. So I'd rather be dealing White in most of those deals.
There are always fun questions around the NFL this time of year, like who are the pretenders and who are the contenders? We're almost halfway through the NFL season, but DraftKings Sportsbook is still pumping out unbeatable offers every single game. New customers can bet just $5 on anything to get $200 instantly in bonus bets, and DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this October. There are actually 7 games on the Week 8 slate with a spread under a field goal. That's spots on DraftKings. So there should be tons of close finishes this week. My favorite of those games is probably Jags Steelers in Pittsburgh, with Jacksonville 2.5-point favorites on the road. Should be a fun matchup between the Jags offense and the Steelers defense. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And of course, as a Ravens fan, I'll be pulling for the Jaguars in that one. However you guys plan to bet that game, get in on the football action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use code FantasyPros. New customers can bet just $5 on anything to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code FantasyPros. The crown is yours. Guys, I rescued a dog over the summer, and in the 3 or 4 months I've had him, he's barked maybe 4 times, and of course he just started barking while we're live, doing a show. So that's always fun. Hopefully it's not coming out too loudly. Let's go to our next most traded running back here, and it's a rookie, Jahmyr Gibbs, coming off his best game in terms of fantasy and in terms of real life too, as a pro for the Lions in that blowout loss to the Ravens. Joe, I'll start with you this time. Are you buying, selling, or holding on Jahmyr Gibbs?
I'll probably buy on Gibbs. The irony is his best game for fantasy comes in by far the Lions' worst game, just a complete egg laying there against Baltimore. But I think you saw the player that we thought he could be. Check down option, explosive. He scored the 21-yard touchdown. And in this offense, as we saw last year, the Lions had 2 top 20 running backs last year. They replaced them both, which tells you what they thought of those running backs. But in this offense, 2 fantasy relevant running backs certainly can produce. And Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, like, even though he's the number 2 in Detroit, I'd rather have him than the number 1 on, at least 10 teams, including Rachaad White, who we just discussed. So no, I'm buying on Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's a solid, maybe not buy low after last week, but his talent was eventually going to win out in this backfield. Frustrating though he may be when David Montgomery gets back, I think he's going to prove obviously last week and next week that he is somebody they need to involve in their offense going forward.
Yeah, Erickson, he had 11 rushes, 68 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 9 catches for 58 yards. So PPR monster there. Are you buying, selling, or holding on Gibbs, Erickson?
I'm going to sell, actually. I'm going to sell high on Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, looking at the offense, this was not a game that they played well. So I don't think the Lions are going to look back on the tape and be like, oh my God, like we were so great on offense. Like let's get Gibbs more involved in this offense. Like again, he played 87% of the snaps. He scored a touchdown in the 4th quarter. What did Gibbs do in the first half? 3 carries for 9 yards, 2 catches for 5 yards when the game was already out of hand. So I don't think that they view Gibbs like fantasy managers are. Like after this breakout game, they're looking like, wow, our offense was horrible. We didn't have David Montgomery. We need to get David Montgomery back in the offense. They have a bye week in week 9. They play the Raiders week 8. So I think if you have Gibbs right now, I think you got to hold him if you need a win this week because they're playing the Raiders. It's obviously a great matchup for him, and Montgomery doesn't come back, which I don't anticipate he will. But at the same time, I didn't think Montgomery was going to come back on that Thursday game either, and then he did, and he scored 3 touchdowns against the Packers. So right now, Gibbs has been frustrating to own because of Montgomery. And the team loves David Montgomery. Like, I don't think they're going to get away from him. He's already been hurt, and they already went back to him already this year. So I've been tricked too many times with the Lions offense, being convinced that, they love this guy. He's so talented. They can't put the genie back in the bottle. They do it all the time. So for me, I think it's an opportunity to cash out on Gibbs, thinking that another manager will be like, oh my God, it's his backfield. Now he's the clear RB1 over David Montgomery. And then the rest of the season, we'd rather have David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, straight up. Like, I think I'd rather have Montgomery, to be totally honest. Like, what have we seen from this Lions offense that suggests, okay, they're going to totally go away from Montgomery and not take and use Gibbs instead? I don't think that's going to happen. So for me, I think it's a sell high. Again, selling high is always something that's not fun to do, but that's what makes it a sell high. Like, I think you can get a lot for him based on his performance in fantasy, not necessarily real life.
Let's get into some trades here. By the way, I don't know what the Lions are thinking, but David Montgomery being out was not the reason they lost that game. It was just a full. But
they can make the excuse like, we didn't have Montgomery, couldn't establish the run. Like,
make that
exactly.
point. Yeah. All right, let's get to some trades here. And this first one I had put down before Monday Night Football. I didn't get to watch Monday Night Football last night, so I saw that there was some stuff with TJ Hawkinson and like injury, but like Kevin O'Connell was actually telling him to go down. I don't know if you guys can weigh in on that better than I can. But the first trade I had put down when putting this together yesterday was Jahmyr Gibbs for TJ Hawkinson. So Erickson, what do you think about that one?
I'm not trading for tight ends. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'd rather have running backs. I feel like there's enough tight ends that I can stream or do things like that. I'm not someone that likes to go out and trade for tight ends, especially with how bad running back is, like, all over the place. So I'd rather I'd rather shoot for something more than Hawkinson, to be totally honest, with Gibbs.
What do you think about that one, Joe? Jahmyr Gibbs for TJ Hawkinson.
I think it's easier to, as frustrating as the fantasy tight end position is, it's easier to find a usable tight end than, I had teams where I'm starting Jaylen Warren at running back because of injuries, so like I'd probably shy away from that. Hawkinson had a couple of looked like lower leg tweaks, maybe a foot injury, but he came back in the game, obviously produced. So we might see him on the injury report this week, but it didn't look like anything to freak out about. By the way,
Erickson, how about Jahmyr Gibbs plus Adam Thielen for Terry McLaurin plus Travis Etienne?
Oh yeah, I don't even need McLaurin. They can keep him. I just want Etienne.
Etienne's the best player in the deal.
Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of expected you would err on that side, Erickson, and I guess both of you. And then the last one here is Jahmyr Gibbs plus Calvin Ridley for Bijan Robinson plus Nico Collins. Joe, how do you make of that one?
Oh, God, put me on the spot here. Arthur Smith. Bijan Robinson plus Nico Collins. I'd probably take the Bijan side.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic for actual good players when Arthur Smith hates them. But no, I'll take the Bijan side of that one.
Erickson, you're going to be hitting more on Bijan in a second, but quickly, which side of that would you take? Gibbs plus Ridley or Bijan plus Nico?
Bijan, Nico side, easy.
All right. Before you guys make any trades at home, you need to check out our trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Instantly see who wins any trade and how it shifts the balance of power in your league for the week, for the rest of the season, and even beyond for dynasty leaguers. Stay ahead and play smart with the trade analyzer on fantasypros.com/myplaybook and on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Guys, let's get into the meat of the show here. The buy low running back segment. Joe, we will start with you. Who is your top buy low running back right now?
It's Tony Pollard. And there was this kind of narrative going around that the Cowboys, the red zone offense, by the way, everyone's red zone offense sucks. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the red zone offense stinks because they don't have that pounder like Zeke Elliott going. And that's why Tony Pollard isn't cut out to be a bell cow. And well, I will tell you this. By expected fantasy points per game, which basically weights his touches and opportunities by where they are located on the field, Tony Pollard is number 2 among all running backs to only Alvin Kamara right now. Alvin Kamara's expected fantasy points per game is otherworldly, but Tony Pollard's is second. He's currently down at the RB 14 in fantasy points per game, though. And coming out of the bye, I think the Cowboys offense is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be a great offense, but I think Tony Pollard is going to positively regress. I think he's going to score more touchdowns, catch a few more passes, and the Cowboys are going to eventually play a normal game. Like, they just haven't really played a bunch of normal games this year, either getting boat raced or doing the boat racing. And in normal games, I think Tony Pollard is going to have that 65 to 75% snap share, a solid target share, and I think he'll be their red zone back. He is my top buy low. I mean, that is a guy who's producing like an RB2 right now, who has a hammer RB1 workload, and that's the kind of guy I want to buy on.
What kinds of, big names would you be willing to give up for him? Like maybe a big name receiver? Are you looking at guys in like that low end wide receiver 1 range? Would you only want to trade a high end wide receiver 2? Who would you be willing to move for Pollard?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like I would think it is like the low end wide receiver 1 type of guys. Those the wide receiver 2 guy who not your Amon-Ra St. Browns. I'm not trading an Amon-Ra St. Brown, or I'm not trading like an AJ Brown for Tony Pollard, but I'm willing to maybe part with a Devontae Smith. I'm willing to part with a Michael Pittman type of guy, Christian Kirk. I wonder if those are the kind of guys that you can get or trade for Tony Pollard. DJ Moore, I think I'd be willing to trade for Tony Pollard. As good as DJ Moore has been, it's been kind of it's been kind of all or nothing with him, though Tyson Bagent might change things. It's a trade, though, with Pollard, who I feel like he could legitimately be the number one running back rest of season. And the role suggests that. The production has not so far.
Erickson, you've also got a big name running back here as your top buy low.
Bijan Robinson. Look, stock hit rock bottom. This is when you buy low. This is the exact definition of buying low on a running back. He can't possibly have a worse game than he did this last week. And look, we all kind of know what happened, but for those that are just tuning in, it's like he had one touch because he was dealing with a headache. He came out and said that after the game, he just wasn't feeling right. He felt bad on Saturday night. He tried to take some medicine on Sunday morning. He did not feel good. So although like the narrative around is that, oh, well, Arthur Smith hates Bijan Robinson, I mean, Bijan Robinson just wasn't like up to playing. And just based on the fact that they went to the game thinking that he was going to play, but then before the game, Bijan's like, I can't go, coach. So it's like, okay, then I'm going to use these other running backs. This is a one-off, very weird circumstance that happened, but people are going to hold this against Bijan Robinson because I started him and he got basically 0 points, and they're going to be frustrated because Arthur Smith does this anyway with his players. But we saw it week 1 with Drake London. Drake London was not involved at all. What happened after week 1? Drake London has a 23% target share, and it's the number one receiver in the offense. It's been pretty productive since him basically putting him a dud in week 1. So the offense is going to get back to Bijan Robinson. And therefore, I just see this as a good value proposition to buy on a guy like Robinson, especially when you look at his playoff schedule. Is really, really good. And you're never going to get him cheaper than you are right now. So people are freaking out. I think that you could honestly get like Deontay, like you could sell high on Deontay Foreman and probably get Bijan. Like there are trades that are going to happen in leagues like that because people are freaking out about Bijan. So that's the move that I would make.
The expert consensus rankings and the rest of season running back rankings in half PPR has Bijan. He did drop a couple of spots. He's still RB5 in those consensus rankings. Same question that I gave to Joe Erickson. What kind of guys are you looking, what kind of names can you throw out that you'd be willing to move maybe at a different position like a wide receiver? Is it kind of that same range or maybe even a little more aggressive than he was for Pollard?
No, I think it's probably the similar types of players. Like I always think it's good practice to sell wide receivers after they have big games because wide receivers are naturally more volatile than running backs anyway. And wide receivers have big games, then they have bad games the next day because of the matchups that they're playing, whether it's zone, man coverage. It's like that's why it fluctuates outside the really top tier wide receivers, whereas running backs are much more consistent. And with Bijan, how good he is involved in the passing game, I think that he's just such a good person to buy. And again, I think anyone that had a big week this week, that's who you should be packaging to go and get Bijan because that manager is really frustrated. I have Bijan in a bunch of spots, and yeah, it sucks, but it's life. Like people wouldn't be holding this against him if he was just ruled out before the game. Like he wouldn't be being docked nearly as much. It's just a bad run out overall for fantasy managers.
Or if the Falcons actually put him on the injury report like they should have.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, which NFL is also like investigating now because they didn't put him on the injury report. So Arthur Smith might get a nice
there's no head coach in football that's going to get less benefit of the doubt from fantasy managers than Arthur Smith. So that's thoroughly unsurprising. Let's get to the sell high running backs here. Joe, who's your top guy?
It's Derrick Henry, and look, Derrick Henry, it feels like the Lucy with the football every year with him. It's like, this is the year I'm defading Derrick Henry. And then he has a bad week, a great week 1, and then a bad week 2, and then he goes nuts the rest of the year. But the Titans trading Kevin Byard, the safety, to the Eagles suggests a teardown is coming. Now, I don't know if Derrick Henry is going to be part of that teardown. So there's two angles here. Does Derrick Henry end up in a spot where maybe he becomes the bell cow? Or does he end up in a spot where he's not the bell cow and he's kind of part of a rotation, which is like where he is in Tennessee right now, because Tajay Spears is playing a pretty significant role in that backfield. And the other angle is if the Titans hold Derrick Henry and this team just gets worse because they sell other parts, does Tajay Spears' role increase? There's too many variables here. I'd look to move Derrick Henry if at all possible.
If he does get traded by the Titans, is there a spot that you're hoping he would land if he's on your team?
So if I were, let's just say if the spot where if I was folding a 19 against the dealer holding 18 and the dealer gets a 3, that would be Baltimore to me. Because Baltimore is the spot where I feel like he could get traded and they could put him in that offense and he would be the guy. Look, he's they have Gus Edwards, right? Derrick Henry is like 3 times Gus Edwards. Like, that's what he is. Baltimore's the spot where if I have Derrick Henry and I'm like, Dolan, nobody wants to trade for him in my league, that's the spot where I would hope he goes, because the Ravens look like a Super Bowl contender to me after what they did to the Lions. And it's just that running back position, which is fine. It's functional right now for them with Edwards and Justice Hill. But that's the spot where I'm like, man, Derrick Henry could be a real game changer.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They need the Heisman backfield. They need to bring it back.
Yeah.
The Heisman backfield.
That was so fun. Baltimore's so interesting because, like, on the one hand, they already have a guy who, like, is in the same box as Derrick Henry in Gus Edwards, like, stylistically. But you're right, Henry's just so much better at that thing. So it's not like he differentiates the skill set in the backfield. He just significantly improves. So that would be super fun.
And that would be that's just the logical move, because what kind of team should be trading for an older running back?
Yeah.
The team where that running back is going to make that fractional difference that could mean the difference between a championship game loss and a Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah. Again, as a Ravens fan, I would be super on board with that. Erickson, who's your top sell high running back?
It's going to be Deontay Foreman. For the Chicago Bears, coming off a 3-touchdown game in a smash spot against the Las Vegas Raiders. Guys, we did this last year with Deontay Foreman. He had a game where he scored 3 touchdowns. And what did he do the next week? Scored 5 fantasy points. Like, I really don't think that this is too hard to parse through. Like, he's benefited a lot from injuries in the Bears backfield, giving him the starting role. You know, again, the great matchup against the Raiders. The matchups coming up are not nearly as favorable for Deontay Foreman. What happens when Roschon Johnson comes back? What happens when Khalil Herbert comes back? Like, there's just too many question marks with this backfield overall, where this is the perfect time to sell out on Deontay Foreman. Like, coming off just the absolute monster game, I think that putting him on the block, packaging with another player to try to move up at running back, package Foreman to try to get Travis Etienne. Like, do whatever you can. Like, do things like that. You know, we talked about some of these buy low running backs. Add a receiver, go get Tony Pollard. Add a receiver, go get Bijan Robinson. Like, this is the move to make, I think, when it comes to Deontay Foreman, because it'd be one thing if this was like a rookie running back, like having a massive breakout game, but we've done this same song and dance with Deontay Foreman, not just last year, but the year before that. Like, there's a reason why teams are not signing him to like this lucrative deal. Like, he plays running back, but he was a healthy scratch for like the beginning of the season. Like, he was behind Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. So I get that he had a great game, but I think it's the perfect opportunity to sell high on Deontay Foreman.
If you guys need new tires for your car, Discount Tire is your go-to. They have exceptional service, and you get a 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online at discounttire.com. They have this really cool feature called Treadwell, which is an online tire buying guide that gives you transparency on tire performance, as well as personalized recommendations based on your location and driving habits. Discount Tire is also the largest independent tire retailer in the country, so it has the biggest selection of tires and wheels. And here's a pro tip from the experts at Discount Tire. You can prevent wear and boost gas mileage by keeping your tires properly inflated. Tire pressure supports the weight of your vehicle and is important to check for safety. So if it's been over a month since you last checked your tire pressure, stop by one of their local stores for a free tire safety and air pressure check. Discount Tire. Let's get you taken care of. Fellas, we will wrap up here with a couple of quick listener questions from Twitter. Question number 1. I was offered Bijan Robinson for Josh Allen in a 1-quarterback dynasty league. My other quarterbacks are Dak and Anthony Richardson, so I'm tempted to accept. Is that a good deal or nah? Again, I was offered Bijan Robinson for Josh Allen in a 1-quarterback dynasty league. He also has Dak and Anthony Richardson. Joe, what do you think about that one?
Bijan Robinson, before he took a snap with the Atlanta Falcons, was my number 1 player in dynasty. At least my number 1 running back in dynasty. Justin Jefferson was my number 1 player. Yeah, I'd take it. And yes, in a 1-quarterback dynasty league, like I'm in a 1-quarterback dynasty league where I have 3 quarterbacks. I have Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff. I can't trade Jared Goff for anything in that league. So quarterbacks always have depressed value. You can ride it out with Dak the rest of the year. I don't know if this team's a contender, which would also color some of my thinking, but I think I'd make the trade. I still believe in Bijan's talent, and you know, as good as Josh Allen is in a 1-quarterback dynasty league, it just doesn't matter as much.
Erickson?
Bijan, easy.
Yeah, I that's a clean sweep. I would definitely agree. I think Jefferson and Chase are pretty much the only 2 names you could that would be more valuable than Bijan in a one quarterback league specifically for Dynasty. So I'm right there with you guys. The other question here is rank these players in order of most droppable. Cam Akers, Zach Charbonnet, Brandon Cooks, Elijah Moore, and Quentin Johnston. I'll read those again. And again, we're ranking in order of most droppable. Cam Akers, Zach Charbonnet, Brandon Cooks, Elijah Moore, and Quentin Johnston. Erickson, you can go first this time.
I mean, you could drop all the receivers. I mean, I'm not holding out hope for really any of these guys at the current moment. The only guy I'd want to keep is actually Cam Akers because he's taking over the backfield. We all saw it Monday Night Football. Like, Cam Akers is happening. So again, sell high on Alexander Mattison yet again. Had to get that in there. Can't do a trade show without talking about Alexander Mattison at least once. But and then Charbonnet. I just think that if I'm gonna have guys on my bench, I want running backs with contingency upside because if Walker gets hurt, then which we've seen him get hurt multiple times throughout the years, last year and banged up a little bit this year in the beginning of the season. I'd rather have the running backs because none of those receivers are like, I'm gonna have to see a good game from them and then I can put them in my lineup. So I'm like 2 weeks away from even like potentially using one of these receivers. Whereas the running backs, I mean, Cam Akers is, his role's already growing in the Vikings backfield. And then Charbonnet, again, just needs an injury to Walker, even though he's injured himself. But Akers would be the guy I wanted to keep the most. And then the receivers.
One more time, those names: Joe, Cam Akers, Zach Charbonnet, Brandon Cooks, Elijah Moore, and Quentin Johnston.
Okay, so the most droppable of these guys to me is Cooks. I just think he's cooked, quite frankly. Then it's Elijah Moore because the Browns quarterback situation is an utter debacle right now. I don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to play this week. I don't know if he's going to play again this season. And even when he has played, he's been terrible. Quentin Johnston is the next most droppable, so I'm with Erickson there. The reason being with Quentin Johnston is Erickson mentioned running backs can get an opportunity like that in the blink of an eye with just somebody going down. Well, Johnston's already gotten his opportunity. Mike Williams has gone down, and he's still out there running wind sprints. So Josh Palmer's become the number 2 to Keenan Allen here. So look, rookie wide receivers can turn it on in the second half. That's been kind of a theme that we talked about on this show. So I'm not burying Quentin Johnston yet, but I would drop him before I drop Charbonnet or Akers. Both of them now, Akers is looking like he might have value independent of Alexander Mattison right now. Charbonnet, I don't think is going to have value independent of Kenneth Walker. But if Kenneth Walker were to go down, Charbonnet might be a top 12 running back for the rest of the season. So that's the order I'd go with.
We'll get out of there on that one. Thank you, Erickson and Joe, for a great show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. For Erickson and Joe, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.